Hey y'all, welcome back to my channel. So there's always a question that I get when people learn that I'm divorced, and they're like, well, did you see the red flags or did you see the things? Yes, I saw them all, and I unfortunately decided to ignore them. So I knew, or I met my ex-husband when I was in college. I think we were 19, 20, and we were young, super young, and we dated for so long, right? And I think that the potential of what we could be together and what we were as individuals was a thing for me that had me in the clouds, honey, okay? And at some point during our dating history, like things were just so toxic that I definitely questioned whether or not he was like the right person for me, because it didn't feel like he was. He was not commitment. He was not commitment driven at all. He didn't exhibit that. And there was just some characteristics and personality things that just were not very becoming. But even with all of that, I still decided to move forward. And all of the signs were there from the very beginning. So let me just start from our dating history. So he was never really upfront about his intention initially. Like, I would get little like nuggets of, oh yeah, you know, your wife material or whatever, but there was never like truly a commitment on a front end. And then it was all the women. And then I found out throughout our dating history, like after the fact, that he had a girlfriend during times and him and I were dating. So unbeknownst to me, I was caught up in some level of relationship with him when he was in a relationship. So that was red flag number one, is that there was never honesty. Like, there are guys that are not ready and they'll tell a woman like, listen, I'm chilling, I'm having a good time, I'm not ready, whatever, whoop-de-woo. And they will move accordingly and allow for the woman to make a decision whether or not they want to be there or not. I wasn't really giving that regard, right? It was more always like hanging like a little carrot dangling in front of me, like, yeah, your wife material, yeah, I really like you, yeah. But boom, that was that. Then there came a time when I did find out, you know, he had a full-on relationship, and I was here on the side messing with him, thinking that, you know, we're going to get serious. So I decided to cut him off cold turkey, and I thought I was doing something, honey. I thought I was like, you know, creating a boundary, and I was doing things well. And then here he comes, like, when I tell you, like, knocking on my door, okay, trying to get into my life, and did all the things, talk to my family, talk to my father, talk to my sisters, and did all these things to make sure that, you know, he was in good graces with everybody that I deemed important in my family. So I was like, all right, let's give it a shot. You know what I'm saying? And I also had some parameters and things that I needed to see as a change that I wrote down in like a 4-page letter. And he agreed to all of them or acknowledged them and things like that. So based on that, I was like, all right, let's do it then. Let's move forward. And we got serious, and we're in a serious relationship. But I found out later, way later, that he was never faithful. He was never faithful. He was out a lot. Then there came, you know, the thing about my culture. That was another red flag, number 2. So red flag number 2 was that he didn't really respect my culture. So if you follow me, you know, I am Panamanian. So I am very ingrained in my Panamanian culture. I go to Panama at least every year. My son is also, you know, very ingrained in our culture. And when him and I were dating, like, he would make jokes about me being Mexican, or, you know, and there's nothing wrong with being Mexican. I love my Mexican brothers and sisters, but I'm not Mexican. I'm Panamanian. So that was always like an annoyance, and he used to do it to get on my nerves, but I really didn't like it. And even me expressing that I didn't like it didn't matter, because he would just continue to do it. But then, like, one of his family members, his mother in particular, you know, would say things under her breath about Spanish people or how we all like live together. And then when we were engaged, she literally asked my mother, like, so are you going to move in when they get married? And my mom was like, what? And she was like, oh, I'm only asking because that's what Spanish people do. And my mom was like, what? So inappropriate. So all of those type of things were happening. I will say that siblings showed a little bit more interest and respect when it came to my culture. And they were like, oh, we got to go to Panama. So in that regard, when it came to his siblings, it was all like fun and games when it came to that. And there was like love there. But when it came to him and his mother, not so much. And when we got married, my expectation would be that he would come to Panama with me, like no question, right? I only had one significant other come to Panama with me before him and I got married. So I'm just like, all right, that was an expectation, and it never happened. And there was no interest. There was nothing. And I had been to Panama like maybe 3 times before we got divorced, and he never showed interest in coming. So that was a red flag for me, because there was no interest in actually being a part of my culture. Like, he came to New York one time with me just to meet my family as a whole, but there was no interest on that end either. And then anytime my family would come to Chicago, and one thing we gonna do is stay at each other's houses. Like, you gonna sleep on the couch, floor, whatever, but you're welcome in my home. Like, that's how we roll. But he would always go away when my family was in town or would come over. And that was unsettling for me too, because it was just like, dang, when it came to some of my friends, like, they would come over and stay. But when it came to my family, for whatever reason, nah. And that was really strange to me. So that was red flag number 2. Red flag number 3. Mr. Man and money was a big deal. Now, he was a 50-50 guy in thoughts. I was not a 50-50 girl in like practicality, because when things were not equal, for us to be 50-50, and in finances at least, right? So that was an argument that was constant, and it was always known, because I came into the relationship and the marriage making significantly less than him. I was working a corporate job and all the things, but I just wasn't at the same, I just wasn't moving at the same pace as him. It took me a little bit for me to understand how to navigate the corporate world, and he got it right away and had all these people like looking out for him and, rising him up, so to speak. It took me a little longer. So for me to like be paying 50-50 into our marital home, whether it was the bills, a mortgage, whatever, I was like, nah, bruh, like, literally can't do that. I can't afford that. Like, I cannot. And it didn't matter. So at that point, when I said, like, I refuse to agree to this, because it's going to put me in a position where I'm always having to ask you for money. Like, that's not fair. And he just was like, fine, whatever. He agreed to not doing the 50-50. And then we try to balance things out where I paid utilities, which are not cheap, but he paid the mortgage, which was not even our mortgage. It was his mama's mortgage, but whatever. That's a whole nother thing. So all of those things, I just was like, okay, but the money was such a big problem all the time, because he viewed everything as his money, right? And he was very resentful that he was paying more into the household. But let me tell y'all, like, I was busting my behind. I was bartending, I was waitressing, and working my corporate job to help pay for whatever I needed to pay for, to even pay some of my debt down, because I didn't want him to be burdened with that. And anytime that he would do something to help me out financially, like, it was a blessing in the moment, but then it was always a dig in the background, right? So that was a red flag, because there was never true partnership there. And I felt like he belittled me a lot because of the financial inequity that we had in the marriage, which was not cool. Like, because it's not like I sold you a dream. Like, you knew what I came in with. And I was slowly climbing up, like, every role or everything that I was doing in my career. Like, I was slowly getting there. And once I hit 6 figures, like, he was like, oh, he decided to quit his job and didn't tell me. But one thing I will say about the finances piece that really, like, gave me an aha moment with that is that one time, there was one particular role that I was interviewing for and then negotiating once it was time for me to get a job offer. And I went to him to help me with the negotiation, because he's great. He, very economically sound, super intelligent when it comes to this type of stuff. And I came to him with everything that I wanted to ask, and he questioned why I would be asking for all those things. Like, and it was standard stuff like a bonus, a sign-on bonus, an increase in salary, and all these things. And he was just like, why would you be asking for that? They're not going to give you that. And I'm like, why wouldn't you be supporting me wanting more? Like, I don't understand that. So to me, it felt like he saw the rise happening, and for me to like be able to flex a little bit more financially, and instead of seeing that as a benefit to the household, I felt like he was treating it as if it was a threat. And that was not cool at all either. Because I'm like, I would think that my husband or my partner, whatever you are to me, like you would be like, yes, ask for this, get it all. We about to come up, right? And that's how I saw it. But the initial reaction was like, they're not going to give you that, or you should be asking for that. And I'm just like, huh? And I ended up doing it and asking for what I wanted to ask for anyway, and I got it. So the mere fact that was the outcome really like struck me in that moment. And by that point, when that was happening, our marriage was rocky because there was so much going on. But that right there was a telling moment, especially after I got the new role and started working a new job. He just decided to quit his job and become an entrepreneur. There was no conversation with me. There was no like, hey, this is how we're going to work out the finances, nothing. It was an expectation that I would pick up everything that he had just because I was making more money. And it was still going to leave me in a bad position because I could not afford the lifestyle that he wanted for us solely by myself. So selfish. And the lack of communication in regard there definitely was a red flag, but there we were. So that was one of the other flags. Now, am I on number four? So red flag number 4. Now, this one is a little tricky just because there were so many things in the background I was not aware of that contributed to his behavior. But I will say that he was super, super, super nasty and mean. He would belittle me in the worst ways. He would talk about my appearance, my body. He would call me out my name. And a lot of that behavior was deflection. I later found out, down the line, that it was because he was cheating. And anytime I got close to finding out, like he would lash out at me, he would disappear, or he would go hang out with his boys till 4 or 5 in the morning. Like, but his behavior towards me was so nasty. And I'm just like, what the hell? Like, what is going on here? But that deflection, the fact that he wanted me to feel so small was like painful, because I'm like, gee, like I'm your wife, like I'm your girl, I'm here with you. And it was so crazy how much he would gaslight me, because I was a bartender and I worked as a waitress at a steakhouse at certain points in our marriage just to help pay down stuff and just like bring some extra income. And he would always be like, oh, you're cheating, or, just tell me that I'm doing something that I'm not. And I'm just like, I'm literally just working. It was weird, but it was all because he was deflecting his behavior onto me. And that wasn't cool either. And what I don't appreciate more than anything is that I did everything in my power to make sure that I did my part. If it was more money that needed to be made, I was working a second job or a third job even sometimes. If it was whatever needed to happen, I was doing those things, and none of that was appreciated. So I just felt like, in all, red flag number 5, he was definitely showing me that he wanted a wife, but he definitely didn't want to be a husband. And then when the affair was found out and all of that stuff came, like, coming out, I was like, dang, so you really weren't committed at all to me, to us, to the marriage, nothing. So it was all this time and all these words and all this vomit of the mouth that were absolutely meant nothing. And I always question whether or not he truly loved me, because the behavior that he exhibited to me was not of someone that loves someone. Like, it was just not. And when people ask me, like, hey, do you forgive him or whatever, or did you forgive him, and I'm like, no, I don't forgive him at all. And I will say that because there has never been a time when he truly showed remorse or like genuine remorse for how he treated me throughout our relationship. It was always met with anger, or because there was something he wanted to gain from me, whether, whatever it was. And there was never a time when he was just like, Dina, I really screwed you over. That was messed up, and I'm really sorry. Like, there was never an apology. It was never nothing. I've never got any closure. And the times that he kind of thought he was doing that, there were so many other lies in the background happening that were even that were like a mountain on top of the things that he was apologizing for. So it didn't balance out anything. And I think that for me, it's hard to even forgive him because he was just terrible, super terrible towards me. And it felt like at times he was happy to be terrible towards me. Like, it brought him some type of joy, which was sick, And I don't believe that you have to forgive a person in order to move on from a situation. Like, I forgive myself. I forgive myself for allowing myself to be subjected to that behavior. I forgive myself for having rose-colored glasses. I forgive myself for keeping the blockers on, but I don't forgive him for how he treated me, because it was terrible. And the things that happened after the marriage, and the lies and all of that stuff with the domestic violence and the affair and all of the things from the other woman that came behind that. Again, how do you forgive someone when there's still more? And then, there's just like whack behavior that still happens in co-parenting. So no, I don't believe that you have to forgive the person. I think that you have to forgive yourself before anybody. So when it comes to the red flags in relationships, I think that in my case, I'm a lover girl. I'm in the clouds. I believe in love. And I want to believe that there's good in people versus bad. And in this instance with him, I wanted to believe that there were good things just in general. And unfortunately, that's not what he showed me. And I just didn't know how to accept that he was not prepared or willing or able to give me goodness. And if I were to go back, I probably would have gone to therapy much sooner, and before him, like just gone to therapy in general, because my brokenness is what allowed me to stay in that relationship that was not serving me and was so painful to me. But at the same time, when I think about the relationship itself, like there were times when I knew that this relationship was not good for me. It wasn't good for my heart. It wasn't treating me well. And I stayed because I just sometimes didn't believe that I was worthy of anything better, unfortunately. And of course, I know today that's not true. But my self-esteem was definitely a part of the reason why I allowed so much to happen. And he knew that too. He knew it. He knew it. And he preyed on it. And he abused it. So when it comes to like the red flags that we sometimes need to keep in check and be aware of, don't ignore them. Don't ignore them. And our intuition always tells us what we need to know. It's up to us to have the discernment to say, yeah, I got to do something with this, or I can't get into that relationship, or nope, I can't give it another chance. And I think when it came to the integrity of like the cheating and stuff like that, cheating was always a non-negotiable for me, and he did not care. And I'll probably record another video about like cheating and why it's a non-negotiable for me, because it stems from family stuff. So that's going to be more so family tied, like from my family background. But there was no respect, regard, care for how much I felt about cheating. And that was problematic. So anyway, red flags, saw them, ignored them, and tried to push past them and try to fix them. And none of that worked. So I urge you to pay attention to the red flags and don't ignore them, all right? So thank you for joining me today for another video. If my content resonates with you, please be sure to like, share, and subscribe. And you can also catch me on all socials that I share up here. And thank you so much. I appreciate y'all, and I will catch y'all next week. Bye!